So welcome to our professional development session on HBDI Digital. My name's Rosie Fitchett and I'm a psychologist and HBDI Master Practitioner. And the reason I'm facilitating today is because I have a Master's in Learning Technology or Learning Science and Technology, which was a Master's program learning about online learning essentially and how to create online learning. I've been working with Herrmann for the last 10 years, and a lot of the names that are popping up are very familiar to me. So welcome to those who I know, and to those who I don't know, who are perhaps certified by Andrew Stagg or Michael Morgan or even Bob Clark. Welcome to you too, and it's very nice to meet you virtually. You'll see me looking over here every now and then because I'm in the classroom over here and I can see your lovely faces on my backup computer. When you're working with technology, you always need to have a backup. So I've been facilitating virtually for the past probably 3 years since I did my degree, and running online certifications, which we have on offer now, and trying to get the best out of technology. I will add that technology for me in my HBDI profile is a preference of a 1 in the work element, so very low preference. So you'll see that means not that I can't do this type of facilitation, but the energy required for me is a little bit more significant than for perhaps some other individuals who don't have a preference score of a 1 for technical in the work elements. All right, moving along. We're going to start with an overview, why we're here, and of course we're going to do it in the whole brain way. We're here to discover how to reconceptualize your facilitation, effectively use HBDI Digital to teach whole brain thinking, and you're going to experience some tested virtual learning strategies throughout today. What are the outcomes? The purpose of the session is to explore how you could facilitate virtually with HBDI Digital using something called the flipped classroom methodology. So again, in the chat box, can you please let me know if you know what flipped learning is? If you've heard of flipped learning, that would be a yes. And if you do not know what flipped learning is, then that would be a no in the box, please. Moving to the red quadrant, what do you need to know or feel comfortable with? You need to feel comfortable with your understanding your HBDI Digital. You need to feel competent to apply new ways of learning. You need to feel open to learning about technology and also focused on the digital space. So thank you for responding to my question there. That gives me a bit of insight about the detail I'll go into regarding flipped learning. What's the process for today? So we're going to understand why digital, what it is, and how it can be applied. You're then going to experience a very mini session, reviewing whole brain thinking virtually. So basically what I'm going to do is share a couple of virtual learning strategies that you can use in your own facilitation. We're going to discuss the HBDI Digital profile, and then we're going to, at the end, review logistical information, so about the technology that's available to support you. And of course, if I was facilitating you virtually and you were just getting to know whole brain thinking in the HBDI, you would then be thinking about how our outcomes actually target the 4 quadrants of the whole brain model. So I would get you to do a clue spotting activity where I would print out perhaps these the overview slide, and I would ask you to color code how you think our Y is whole brained, and you can see there the different colors targeting the different quadrants. It is exactly the same with the outcomes. They are also phrased, communicated in a whole brain way. Our feelings are communicated in a whole brain way, and our agenda is targeting the whole brain quadrants. And so this is helping me reinforce the model and making sure that my actual design is whole brained in its learning approach. So that would be the outcome. That's the outcome for today, and what we'll be focusing on. I just thought I would quickly share who is in our group today. And this is the preference map of the individuals who are attending. You can try and figure out which individual you are. And so this perhaps will impact the experience we have in virtual learning, but it's important for me as a facilitator to recognize that so that I can ensure I am engaging individuals throughout the program. I did have a little giggle at the very strong right mode preference of our group. Some of you may also be experiencing a lower preference for technology like myself. All right, I'm going to start with the magic of digital, just talking about the why and what it unlocks and what it enables you to do. Obviously, it enables you to work with virtual clients, digital clients, and remote clients. It also increases the flexibility in delivery, and this is what I'm going to focus on today, talking about the flipped classroom, where you can actually provide access to your HBDI profile before the classroom session. And so traditionally we had a 3-hour learning experience called Start Thinking. It was a workshop where people learnt about the model, they got their profile and they applied it. So what I'm going to talk today is how we can mix that delivery method up. It obviously reduces our carbon footprint, always good for the environment. And having a digital profile means that it is always available. You just log on to the URL. So if you have to do a debrief and the profile didn't arrive in time, every individual has access to a digital profile, and as a backup, it's a very good thing to have, and then also to apply in an ongoing way, so consistently use over time. Lastly, Herrmann Global are constantly adding additional tools for your thinkers, and I will show you where they live and currently what we have. And so these tools are going to help your thinkers learn about whole brain thinking and apply their profile. When I use the word thinker, I'm referring to the end user. It is the term that Global used to describe the end user, so the client or the stakeholder who's participating in the HBDI. So they're going to be referred today as the thinker. Any other reasons for why HBDI, the magic of HBDI, we are going to discuss in a moment. Oh, there's one. I forgot to say. Isn't it ironic that I forgot about the blue one? If you know my profile and you know me, that you'll know the blue is my lowest quadrant. A blue benefit is that there is cost saving potential with HBDI Digital. And what that means is less travel time. So I don't have to go anywhere. I'm sitting in the comfort of my own home in Brisbane, facilitating with you. And in terms of the actual profile cost, if you are a self-processor, you'll be saving money because you won't need to purchase the books if you don't want to, and you won't need to purchase the profile pack that comes with this information. Bradley's telling me, is there a blue quadrant? There is, and there are some of you today that have a higher preference for that, so we can lean on you perhaps to keep us accountable to our blue quadrant. All right, so I'm going to just explain what flipped learning is versus traditional learning, and then we're going to compare how we could actually use digital in a classroom. So when we learn something, we do three things predominantly. We develop knowledge, we develop information. This is the what. What are we learning about? We're learning about whole brain thinking, we're learning what the quadrants are. Then we have some experience. So we might complete an activity, we might put our learning into action, we might discuss the information we've learned, but we have some kind of experience. And effective learning involves both a knowledge element and an experiential element. And so this is the way that we would have been working with whole brain thinking and the HBDI traditionally. Then what would happen is we apply that information. So we apply our knowledge and our experience around whole brain thinking, perhaps to how we communicate, how we design, how we make decisions, how we solve problems. And so learning has this sort of three-step, there are many other steps, but these are the key 3 steps that we really want to target in a learning experience. And what happens in our 3-hour session when we introduce someone to HBDI is those 3 things happen very iteratively. We move between them from knowledge to experience, back to knowledge, then to application. So we're moving through them very quickly. When we use flipped learning, however, we start to structure and categorize these into smaller chunks and processes. So what happens is that the knowledge component, a lot of that is designed to happen prior to the classroom. And so if you think about the way I created this learning experience today, I actually asked you to develop some knowledge prior to today by giving you access to videos and also giving you access to your profile and discussion questions. So that was all designed to develop some knowledge. And some of you may have completed that and some of you may not have. One of the biggest challenges of flipped learning, but that part happens before. Then we get to the classroom and we are in a virtual classroom today, and we start to develop experiences. We share, we participate, we engage, we listen, and that's happening in the classroom. Lastly, we go into the application. And so if you have a reduced time in the classroom, the application is probably happening after the class in the real world, in the work environment. So you might be asking your groups to apply whole brain thinking to how they run their next team meeting, for example. And so what flipped learning means is that the knowledge happens prior, and so participants come with a lot more information than normal. It's quite an effective way to design learning. And what digital enables us to do is access this flipped learning design very effectively for virtual clients, because we can give access to the HBDI digital profile prior to the classroom session. And so that's what I've modeled for you today. So to get a bit greener and to think about the scenarios for using digital, there are two essentially. There's your traditional standard classroom where you still have 3 hours of learning. It's maybe face-to-face, it could also be virtual. And what happens in that process? The first thing is participants need buy-in. Participants need buy-in irrelevant of using digital or not using digital. They need buy-in so that they complete the survey with the right mindset and with limited barriers like, oh, you know, I don't want to be judged and evaluated by this assessment, so I'm not doing it. Or I don't think this assessment is valid, so I'm not doing it. So before we get to those questions, we need the buy-in. They complete the survey, then they come into a 3-hour physical or virtual classroom where they learn about whole brain thinking, access the HBDI, and complete application activities. So if you choose this option, the only thing you really need to change is you would be switching out the paper version for the digital version, or you can continue to use the paper version. It's still there, it still exists, and it's still available for you. If you wanted to use digital, you would just switch one in for the other and use that instead. Or instead of switching one for the other, you could use both. Instead of an either or, it's a this and that. The other scenario is the innovative and new option called flipped classroom or flipped learning. So what would happen in this session design is participants would still have buy-in, and how I would run that if it was my choice is I would actually run a 45-minute session virtually before they even complete the survey. I'd use something like Zoom, and I would get them buying into the concepts, the why we're doing it, the bigger picture. And I'd be teaching them things like this isn't about competence, it's about preference. And I'd share those things before they're getting to fill in the survey. It also enables me to test out the technology if I am facilitating virtually. They do the survey, then they complete something called fundamentals, and they need to do that so they develop knowledge of the 4 quadrants. They access their HBDI in their home, and they come into the classroom and participate in a 90-minute session where we focus on those 3 things: why whole brain thinking, where the model came from, the profile review, and then my application would happen after the classroom, and that would be in the real world, applying it to a meeting, applying it to communication, and I would be checking in with how they were going. So if you're mathematical, which we've already ascertained I'm probably not, you can see that the flipped classroom method still involves 3 hours of learning experience. 45 minutes plus 90 minutes plus 45 minutes equals 3 hours of learning. But that learning is able to happen in a different method, in a different structure than if it were the 3-hour in the class session. So either way, learning whole brain thinking is going to take around 3 hours to learn it, to understand your HBDI and to apply it. In fact, it does really take even longer if you want to keep applying it over time, but that's essentially what we recommend. And so these are the 2 options, and flipped learning is, as I said, the knowledge happens prior to the classroom. Okay, what I'm going to do now is test our first breakout group experience. And this is a strategy I use in virtual classrooms. And so you're going to participate in it today. Apologies, tongue-tied. All right, so this is the activity. I want to know what you know. You are about to be allocated to a breakout room. So I'm going to divide you up into rooms where there'll be a couple of you and your colleagues discussing. You're going to focus on one quadrant only. So if you're allocated breakout room 1, you'll just focus on the A quadrant. If you're breakout room 2, it'll be the B quadrant, etc. What you need to do is you need to take a screenshot of this activity so you can see it later in the breakout room. And if you are very competent with technology, you can also select to share your screen so you can display it in the breakout room. If you don't know how to do any of those things, then you better quickly write down the questions on this slide so you can take them into your classroom. At the conclusion of your discussion, you're going to allocate a speaker who will briefly summarize your discussion and share what you discussed with the wider group when we come back. What I would like you to do now is in the chat, who was the allocated speaker? If you didn't allocate a speaker and you are confident to speak for your group, please do so. So for breakout room 1, which was the A quadrant, thank you, Kate. And I'm going to ask if you would be kind and please share the discussion from your group.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
So we had those questions about what is HBDI Digital. So we had a quick chat about, we moved very quickly into the advantages of the platform being digital and the accessibility, throughout teams, throughout organisations, obviously not needing to be in one place. So that was a big advantage. We talked about that, and we're getting requests. We're seeing from organisations requests for, well, I've got a virtual team. What do I do about that? Well, perfect opportunity to use the HBDI digital platform. So that was good. The other part of our question was, what are the facts and figures? And of course, this is when our particular breakout group sensed that we had been played. All self-confessed red, yellow preferences. So nobody busted out a calculator or an Excel spreadsheet during our group breakout. So as I reflect on that conversation, I think it was more of a reiteration of our previous point about what the platform does and how can we use it and how can we take advantage of it. And we treated those as the facts. We didn't do any costings or anything like that. I suspect that if we had a stronger blue preference or a green preference, somebody might have crunched some numbers.
Excellent, no problem there. Thank you very much, Bradley. Round of applause, appreciate you sharing, and thank you to the rest of your group for your discussion. So I'm going to, we'll talk more about that at the conclusion, but thank you very much for sharing some excellent ideas from the blue quadrant. All right, into the B quadrant, which was Kathy. Thank you very much, Kathy. I'll get you to unmute yourself and to share what you discussed.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my camera's not working, so you'll just have the voice. So how and when you would use the HBDI Digital, we thought it's great for virtual teams. It's also really good if you're debriefing an individual, which we traditionally do maybe via Zoom. And we also thought that potentially the blues and greens might really enjoy that digital experience potentially more than the yellows and reds. We did think there were some risks associated with it. So there was the risk that people didn't do the pre-work. There was the risk that it was disengaging, particularly for the red quadrant. And there was also that sense of making sure the follow-up and the application happened the right way. So we did think there was some risk associated, but definitely benefits to virtual groups, disparate teams, and individual debriefs.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to your group as well. And I think it's really important to be aware of the risks. Another big one is the failure of technology. So there's a participant today, Natalie, who wasn't able to access the breakout rooms, and so that is a challenge. And so you're dealing with those as well. Those, it's like Michael Morgan told me, it's like having to facilitate the session in the classroom, but you also happen to be playing the role of the building manager. So you're running in between floors and making sure all the doors are unlocked and the windows are open and there's fresh air. So it's an interesting role. There are definitely risks, but if you're aware of them, so engaging the red quadrant, for example, then you can create some strategies to overcome that scenario. So in breakout room 3, Susan McDonald, are you able to unmute yourself and summarise the discussion for us instead?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, Amy actually was the tech whiz in this, and also she raised the issue around the problem in the issues for people in that quadrant are in that you're not actually meeting their emotional needs, so you're not meeting the needs of it's a very cold approach. So it's probably that's the issue with people in this group, and particularly as she raised the issues around you know, if you're working in regional areas and areas where there are high stress, a lot of emotional issues, so the technology just doesn't really quite fit with the issues.
Yeah, excellent. So one of the things that I will say as a way to overcome that is when I facilitate virtually, I really reduce the number in the group so that I can develop a connection more with the people. So today's group is, we opened it to 30, which is very large and from an emotional connecting point of view, very difficult to do. If I was facilitating virtually with HBDI, I would be requesting that I do more sessions of shorter time with smaller numbers, and I like about 9 participants, and that means that we can possibly see everybody in the classroom and connect more effectively with them. So that is definitely an impact, and I've experienced both as a learner, both big groups and smaller groups, and so it's very important to think about that and the impact that would have. So thank you so much for sharing those thoughts and from your group. All right, last breakout group, just doing a quick time check. In group 4, it was Conrad or Rob who had, which of you was the designated speaker for your group? Rob, when I throw you in the deep end, can you unmute yourself?
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
My camera is working, but I'm working from home today. I'm on the couch, so I've decided just not to put the camera on. So.
But we'll all have an emotional connection to your couch. That would be nice.
I'm wearing my red jumper too, so I'm trying to embrace the red. We had from the benefits and opportunities for the business perspective. Both Danny and I work in large organisations, so we talked about how organisations are embracing digital anyway. So it seems to be an easy move, makes sense. There's obviously the cost benefit. Yes, Bradley, I did bust out a calculator and think about that from a business perspective, and then also from logistics. When I have to deliver to a group, there's always 1 or 2 people who can't turn up. So then it's a matter of catching up those people. So this might make it a little bit easier, which has benefits for the organisation. We talked about soft copies, which is good because Danny was mentioning her organisation is going to hot desking. So you don't have that physical copy you have to carry around. You've got access to it whenever you need it. We talked about, again, both of us working in large organisations, having regional diversity so we can actually bring groups together from Sydney, Melbourne, Cairns, even international in our case, to get a little bit more diversity in the group so you're not working with the same groups all the time. Flexible workers, or the bums that work from home like me. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Rob, and thank you for sharing from your group, or you had a pair in your group, which was quite nice when you have smaller numbers. So I'm going to go back now and share my slides. So bear with me while I get back into the technology. So just so that I am aware, I need to clarify that you can now see the slides again, and instead of everybody's faces. So either, yes in the chat is the most helpful way for me to know that you can. And my cursor's gone missing. Where are you, cursor? Come back. There you are. And we're going to move on. So that is a strategy you can use in virtual classrooms, breakout rooms, getting people to discuss, getting people to share. And when you have a model like whole brain thinking, you can see how the quadrants might play out and those insights happening. All right, I'm going to move on now And currently, you're all practitioners, and we've been thinking about digital for our participants, or our thinkers, as we call them globally. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to change hats. So you're going to move from practitioner and you're going to become the participant. So you're wearing a new hat. From practitioner, you're now in the participant hat. So as I move forward, I want you to be thinking about the experience from that hat as a participant who's learning about HBDI, the whole brain model, and looking at their digital profile. So what I'm going to do now is run a kind of selection of slides that I would use in a virtual learning environment. And you're going to ask me, are these slides available? Yes, they will be available. I just need a bit of time to collate them and get them ready for you. They will be available in the portal. So as a sequence, you'll be able to download the slides and use them as you choose. When we create slides for you guys, we always white label them. So we take away our branding so that you can use your own branding. So that's the way they'll look slightly differently, but you'll have them there. So the first thing I would start in is with the group is the why, the big picture, and I love this image, the lens, the idea that we can think about things from 4 quadrants. We can use it as a lens to understand ourselves and others and how we do things, and the outcomes of our workshop were considered using the 4 quadrant lens. What I would then need to think about is how do I engage thinkers with the why? So we have a model that we use to do this already, and you may use it as well. What do? We use images and metaphors in the yellow. So we need to engage them in the why from all perspectives. We need to use strategies from all perspectives. So teach them the concept, teach them the big picture, teach them the opportunity. We need to also engage them in the why from a blue perspective, which is about metrics and measures to improve. So maybe improving a culture rating on a survey, or an engagement score, or what is the thing that is not going well but we can actually change and measure and track to show that this is actually working. In the red quadrant, it's about the stories and the case studies, the examples that whole brain thinking actually does work, does have an impact. The August Home example is there, and it talks about the shift in revenue from 80K to 450K in a 2-year period. So what stories, and you might have your own personal stories, success stories you can share. And lastly, in the green quadrant, I need to have a clear and safe plan of action. So I need to make sure that you are feeling connected, that you know the steps and the process. And so often how I would do that is I would make sure that my plan is whole-brained, making sure that I'm targeting each of the quadrants, the why we're in the session, the what we're here to achieve, what the feelings are you need to make sure you're comfortable with, and the process or agenda. So what I would then do is, there's a little insight that reminds me to say, so why do we do this? Why would we use this process? To engage our thinkers in the bigger picture, to open their minds to whole brain thinking, to ensure they feel safe and in control. So important normally in a workshop, but also very important in a virtual space, because I can't see your faces all the time. I can't tell if you're connecting and buying into what I'm sharing straight away. So what would I do then? I would send you guys into a breakout room. So you'd be answering this question in a breakout group. You would be allocating a speaker just as you had. You'd have 5 minutes to discuss, and then you come back and share. So why do I ask this particular question? Why do I do this activity? It enables you to discuss and work collaboratively. It enables me to check your understanding of whole brain thinking. And it also enables me to identify any missed opportunities in terms of application in my workshop design to see, or did I miss anything that we could actually apply this to moving forward. I'm not going to run that activity. I just wanted to explain that's what you could do. Then what I would be doing is recapping on what they had done and the pre-learning steps. So if you were in this workshop, what you'd done previously was complete a survey and complete the e-learning fundamentals program, introducing you to the 4 quadrants of the whole brain model. You were then sent email access to your HBDI digital profile with reflection questions to complete. And so you guys received that email where I gave you access, and you received the reflection questions that I like to use. They're quite detailed, but they take you through each of the data points of the digital profile to get you thinking about your data. So you've come to the workshop with quite a considerable amount of pre-learning. You get into the workshop, and this is what I want to know. What questions do you have as a result of what you've learned, or what are your reactions to what you have learned? So I want you to answer this question for me in the chat box. So whether you did the pre-learning or not, it doesn't really matter for this particular question. So what I'm asking you to type in the chat box are, what are the questions you have about digital and the digital profile? Or what are your reactions to what you have seen so far in terms of digital? Okay, so that was 1 minute, and luckily my music even enables me the time, and I give you 1 minute to discuss. So we have a whole lot of questions coming through. Some of those I might get Chris to answer in the chat for you. So is the digital copy there forever? Yes, it is, unless you redo it, and then the new one will be available. We'll look at the cost difference, and the cost difference occurs if you are a self-processor. So I can talk about that. I'm not actually sure the actual figure, but we can minus the processing and shipping costs and give you an idea there. Chris might be able to get his calculator out. Who else gets to see digital? I think if you mean digital, everybody gets to everyone who does a profile gets to see their digital profile, new users, and there's a process for previous users to access it. The Share My Practitioner option is there so that if I'm facilitating your session, but there's another practitioner who you work with you'd like to share your data with, you choose to share it with them so that you provide consent to have your data shared with another practitioner who might facilitate. So that enables you to share the questions. Anything else? A couple about cultural differences, which I can talk to more generally. So when I facilitate virtually, I've found that culturally there are differences, and it's been more effective to facilitate within one culture and then bring them together with the expectations. So if I'm facilitating in India and then in Singapore and Australia, I will facilitate each of those separately, and then when they understand the common language, then I bring the cultures together to communicate. But the initial part is separate, and bring them together, which has been more effective than initially just bringing all of the cultures together, because they don't yet necessarily have the common language to communicate. So some of those other questions I might take offline and give you some more information to. But what the reason for this particular slide is that it helps me clarify what you want to know up front. If you were talking and asking questions about HBDI, it would help me identify if you might be more of a skeptic, develop a plan if there are tricky questions or that I need to take offline. And the other thing I could do is map questions to the quadrants. So if I get a question about how will I use this, that's a green question. If I get a question still asking why are we doing this, that's a yellow question. So I can start to map my questions to the quadrants and understand the thinking of my group and what they are asking of me. So another way to strategy you can use in the virtual learning environment. So thank you for sharing. So now I've kind of introduced the session to my groups, and in the real world it's probably taken me about 20 minutes to do this. I then get into a recap of the model. And so I'm just going to model a couple of strategies again that you could use in your groups to facilitate this virtually and also in the classroom. So one of the first things I do is I ask you this question: what do you think? So I'm going to show you an image, and in the chat box I want you to type what comes to mind. Some of you will have seen this before. What I want you to type in the chat box is the one word that comes to mind. So just the first word that hits you when you see this image. So here's the image. What word hits you when you see that image? What comes to mind? Please type it in the chat box for me. So even in that very short amount of time, and we can scroll through our responses: fun, confused, origami, mountains, collaborate, patterns, life, color, Christmas, chaos, triangles. Oh my goodness, that is such a good example that not one of you so far said the same word. Not one of you. You all said something different. And this is exactly what Ned Herrmann was interested in. Why do I show you this image and all the people who are in the session responding in different ways? Where does this come from? What does it mean to think differently? And so what Ned did was he said, we we see things differently, we process in different ways, and we can map this process into these quadrants. Blue quadrant being someone saying it's art, it's a piece of artwork, it's Picasso. The green, someone might respond from a more of a detail point of view, triangles, squares, blue or green, say listing some detail. In the red, it's the experience, it's the messy, it's the fun, it's the experiential perspective. And in the yellow, it's the connections. It looks like Christmas. It reminds me of Christmas, or actually that's probably a little bit red, or where was it, origami or mountains, that fun. It's probably a bit red too. So you can see how some of these responses map into our different quadrants. And so this is what Ned was interested in. And using this concept of how do we see things differently, he created his model, a model for the way that our brain thinks. And so this is our 4-quadrant model, which we already know. So then what I would do is an activity. Now I'd do one of two things. I'd either put you into a breakout group again, and I would get you to discuss, say, just one of the quadrants. So the blue quadrant in terms of school, occupation, buying a house, solving a problem, and hobbies. Or the other thing that I'd do, which I'm going to hopefully model today, is I would do a poll. So what I'm going to do is, because this is the quicker version, I'm going to launch a poll, which should have just appeared on your screen. And so I want you to imagine you are buying a car. Now, you know about these quadrants because you've done fundamentals and you're also certified practitioners. So if this thinker was test driving every car on the list, which quadrant of thinking are you accessing? So you should be able to select your answer, be it A, I'm just trying to use my backup computer here, or C. And so I want you to select your answer for each of these questions. The second question says, if you consider the color and aesthetic of the car, what quadrant are you accessing? The third is if you rely on gut feel, intuition, what quadrant? And the last one is if you evaluate fuel consumption and energy. Okay, so I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 30 seconds actually. You don't need too much time. Thank you, Chris is saying. If you can't see the submit button, it's you need to scroll down. So fill in your survey. You've got 20 seconds left. Ten seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So some of you can't see the poll. Actually, one of you can't see the poll. The rest of you can. And what I can tell from a facilitator point of view is how many of you are engaged in my session right now. I can tell what the percentage of you who have voted, and I can tell the percentage who haven't voted. So it's a bit of a gauge in engagement. So 60% have voted. So some percentage of you are either gone off to make a cup of tea, or you are not sure and you don't want to communicate your answer. So what I can do is end that poll, and then I can share the results with you. So here is our thinking about the different responses, and what I would be doing, you can scroll down to see how people responded, is I would discuss them. So the first question, if you test drive every car on the list, it is the B quadrant. And why? Because you need to think about it as being very experiential, very practical, and you have a list. So the key words there were that you have a list and that you're actually practically doing the test driving. The second question, color and aesthetic, that's a bit of a tricky one, but if you are into color and aesthetic, it is all about yellow. It is visual. It is about the look. Of course, the look may make you feel something, which is why some of you perhaps chose red, but the essence of someone considering the look of their car, how it looks, and the aesthetic, the design element, is a yellow thinking thing to do. If you consider gut feel, it is the C quadrant. Again, I picked a tricky one. Intuition does come up in the red and the yellow quadrants, but when it is gut feel, it is very much coming from the red perspective, because it's about the sense, the experience, the connection you have to the car. Intuition is the yellow, is more about the, oh, I'm going to get this car because it's the newest car on the market, or it's a great car for my future, or it's going to have the best resale value, or some big picture concept that you think. And last question is, if you evaluate fuel consumption and energy efficiency, you are accessing the A quadrant because you are accessing a very evaluative mindset, and you're comparing, contrasting and considering numbers. So that is our poll and a way to talk about the different quadrants. I'm going to stop sharing that now, so it should disappear, and back to my slides. As a summary, I might talk about different characters in history: Isaac Newton, the mathematician; Julius Caesar, the political military man; Mother Teresa, the nun, interpersonal perspective; and then Leonardo da Vinci, the artist. Now, of course, each of these thinkers probably has a mix of thinking within them, but the essence of how we see them and how we perceive them. An activity I do like to throw in here that's not on my slide is create the typical A quadrant character in your organization. So think about, if you work at the ATO, who is the most typical A quadrant character you can think of, and come up, describe them. What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they say? What do you notice? What do you observe? And do it for the organization as another fun activity. Okay, moving on, I would then make sure I'm explaining preference. This is very important to always include, that we're talking about preference, not competence. I get people to write with their non-preferred hand, to fold their arms, to clasp their hands together and look about which thumb is on top. These are all activities in the preference, about preference, sorry. Why do we have it? For speed and efficiency. How do we define it? It's a natural inclination. Where does it come from? Genetics, our environment, blame plasticity, all things you should be familiar with as a practitioner. I might talk about clusters at this point, to talk about how we can have a preference for a quadrant, but we may not have a preference for all of the descriptors within that quadrant. So there's clusters of thinking. Lastly, I would summarize that we measure our whole brain thinking preferences using the HBDI. So we have a model which was then created a survey to enable us to measure that model, and the survey output is the actual HBDI survey. So that's where we're going to head next. And then, of course, another activity. So if you want to remember this activity, this is one I would run in the group again. I'm not going to do it today, but this is about the red quadrant. How do we make sure everyone feels comfortable sharing or discussing their profiles in a digital environment, and what key messages should we reinforce with others? So this is asking the group, how do we make sure that we are comfortable sharing? How do we use this information? How do we make sure we uphold the ethical principles around doing these things? And then making sure we actually do uphold them. And this is about safety and sharing of information. Okay, so then I would summarize with some facts, which you can read here and will be available in the slides. So that was sort of one learning chunk, and that was learning about the evolution of the HBDI, making sure I've taught them the models and metaphor. The HBDI is the instrument. It's about preference, not right or wrong. And what we're looking at is thinking, not behavior, values, personality, intelligence. So then I can get into the digital profile. So at this point of the workshop, I already know when they've been given access to digital. In your case, you've been given access prior, but if I had more time online, I may be giving you access within the classroom. So it's something that is clear to me what's happened at this point. In your context, you've already been given visibility. Furthermore, I've given you access to a 20-minute talking head presentation of myself going through HBDI Digital and explaining each of the pages. So today I'm not going to go through each of the pages and talk about what they are. I'm going to talk about more how I would apply it in the classroom. If you want to go back and learn about the different pages of the HBDI Digital report, please view that video, which will take you into more depth and detail. So just in terms of access, you access your HBDI Digital through something called the Thinker Portal. So each thinker creates an account when they complete their HBDI now, and when they create that account, that enables them to get into the Thinker Portal, which is this page here. I'm going to explain the Thinker Portal in more detail in a moment. But I want you to do an activity first. And to get there, you need the URL. So basically you decide when you provide access to the URL, so they get to their Thinker portal, they log in, and then they can't see their profile initially. You need to give them a code to unlock their profile. So this profile is blanked out because I didn't want this thinker to see it. And so when they click there, and I give them a code so they unlock it. So you still have control over the unlock process. I'm getting ahead of myself and explaining things I need to share with you later. So let's move on to some activities that you could participate, you could conduct. One of the activities that people always say, oh, it's my favorite, it's the guess your profile, reveal your profile. Now, if you use digital, you can still do this activity, because if you use fundamentals e-learning, they guess their profile in that process and they're asked to print it. Then when they get to their actual profile, you can still ask what surprised you, what was confirmed, respond in the chat. So this is an example for me. I guessed the one on the left, and the one on the right is my actual profile. And I might be surprised by my lack of green. I see myself more green than is come out in my profile. So that could be something as a facilitator you'd need to deal with and help me understand how maybe green isn't a preference, but I've developed competence to operate in the green space, and that would be true in my case. So that's how you do the guess your profile. Why? It's introducing the model, well, fundamentals introduces the model, and guess your profile helps us establish face validity, which is, you know, what you're seeing in your profile, what you expected or not, what are your insights and what are your surprises, so you can still gain that insight. Then what would happen is I would either navigate through each page of digital to share what it is, how you explain it, why we have it, and ask you for a thinker insight. Now, it depends on time whether I do this, but you've got access to these slides. So each of the pages you can talk to. So this is the welcome screen. If you want to still use the paper copy, but you don't want to print our booklets and you don't want to do all that, you can always access the 2-page summary in digital. So through your digital profile, you click on print summary there, and you can access the traditional 2-page summary. And sometimes I would still use that in a virtual facilitation rather than the digital. I might use this 2-page summary to display to the group and then get them to discuss and share theirs, or I might go through the actual digital report. So you still have both of those options. This is the menu bar. So again, what is it, how you explain it, why we have it, and this is how we navigate the profile. And then we get into the different elements of the profile. So as I said, I'm not going to go through the different parts of the digital profile because there's a recording for you to do that prior or post the classroom session. What you'll notice though on each of the pages is a thinker insight, and it says it's a question that we're asking the thinker to engage them with their profile. Those questions were the questions that I emailed you prior in the handout, and so I'm bringing these questions to life in the classroom. And so once I've described what digital is, I would get to an activity. And so the activity would look like this. You'll be divided into pairs and triads, and you'll discuss your profiles. You can share on your screen your profile if you're comfortable. Why we're doing it: to bring life and meaning to the data, and to learn about your colleagues, and to share implications of thinking at work. I would say choose 2 to 3 questions that were provided in the handout emailed to you and discuss them in relation to your profile. You've got 15 minutes, and before you return, allocate someone to speak to the group. So that's what I would get you to do if you were in a real environment. But as practitioners now, what I want you to think about is, how would you use this activity during virtual facilitation, or what ideas do you have to engage your thinkers in that virtual space using HBDI Digital? There were 3 different groups that were discussing just then, and one of who I popped into to have a little chat with, and the other groups who I hope had an interesting conversation. So group 1, Amy, Rob, I'm not sure of, is it Isha? I'm not sure of the name there because it's all mixed into one, Robert and S. Gilani. Who is speaking for this particular group? Last time we had Rob, but it would be nice to hear someone else's voice. Leah, if you can unmute yourself and share.
Sure. No worries. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just had a conversation around, you know, the activity itself. it's good to keep it in small groups, pretty much like the breakout room we just had, because people are often finding that that's the first time that they're digesting a lot of the information and sharing it. So it's often where they have a lot of light bulb moments around, you know, this is why I do this, this is why I do that, both from a work and a personal perspective. We were a little bit concerned around how we manage the personalisation of that, because I guess not everyone might have videos on, and people take sort of visual cues around how other people are looking about their profiles and feel a comfort level to then share. So losing that personalisation from a group setting. And also we were kind of wondering what your thought process was around when you were pairing the breakout groups. Did you actually have like people in the groups together, or was it just a range of different profiles?
Good question. So in a real world, what I would have done is spent more time and used the linear report, which you can see me showing you here, and grouped you according to profile. So I would have started the session initially with more similar thinking together and maybe challenging your thinking, and then here I would have diverse thinking. So that was a good insight to have. That's what I would do. I would definitely have smaller groups. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a group. So if you were in discussing a profile, I'd probably put 2s or 3s together. Another thing that I do is I ask consent to share their profile on the screen in the bigger room. And I get them to share their stories. I say, share your life story in 2 minutes of how your profile came to be. And I ask that they're okay to do that beforehand, but it gives them a voice for their profile. They've seen their profile, they know the details. And so that's another way to help connect. So then when I get to more of the discussion at this point, they're more comfortable. So there are other strategies that you could use, but very relevant things to bring up and discuss. Thank you very much to your group, and thank you for sharing. Round of applause, virtual round of applause for your group. All right, breakout group 2. So we had Bradley, Chris, Kathy, and Tim. Bradley's already spoken, Kathy's already spoken. Chris or Tim, take it away. Maybe Chris. You're muted. Oh. Thank you, Chris. I can see your face there. You're being thrown in.
Yeah, I was just trying to find the unmute button. Cool.
We can hear you.
Yep. Sorry, which was our question again?
So the question, can you see the slide still? It says, how would you have used the activity in virtual facilitation, or what other ideas did you have to engage thinkers in the virtual space?
So there was a lot of conversation about breaking up in groups and getting people to share in smaller groups to begin with. And the other sort of idea I sort of put out to the group there as well is sometimes you have a group, you have like thinkers and like roles. And sometimes you break them into groups, you've got people in different roles sharing like thinking. So that's a way of bringing groups together as well. Yeah, that's all I had on that one.
Yep, great, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and for the discussion with your group. So we just had someone who had to leave. Last group was Rob and Susan. Oh, don't know how that worked out. Oh, because someone just left. I know Rob's an introvert, but Rob, we're in a virtual space here. How do you feel about turning on your microphone and sharing the insight that you had in your group, which was a bit different to the others?
Yeah, marginally introverted, working in the virtual world all the time now is sort of making that even a little bit stronger. So, yeah. Anyway, look, we entered into the breakout room with quite a bit of confusion about, and we were sort of asking, what was the question? What are we supposed to be doing? How are we supposed to be going about this? Is it the question in red or down the bottom that we're trying to answer, or what it is? And so we ended up just getting Rosie back on the line to try and explain it to us. I'm not sure that we were any clearer, but we ran out of time anyway. So, but yeah, the interesting thing about that, I guess, is that this is what happens when you're in a real classroom. Certainly when you're in a real classroom, you have the advantage of being able to walk around to the different groups and go, okay, so does everybody understand what we're doing in a digital sort of using a webcast or this sort of training, you find people don't actually ask questions. I mean, I've been running this sort of training now for roughly 10 years on and off. And that's the biggest challenge, is that people just don't ask questions. And it's easy to hide, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where, I guess, in hindsight, having these questions out first is probably a really good way of pre-warning and getting people thinking about it, so that you can then overcome that confusion or potential confusion.
Mm. Yeah, excellent. Well, there you go. You did just answer the question. A good insight to have. That one of the reasons to provide questions up front is to develop the level of comfort to be able to share. The other thing that I shared with that group is I always ask 2 questions, because I know that some people have done a very detailed review of the pre-learning and some haven't. And so you'll notice those 2 questions. The first one says, how would you use this activity and questions during virtual facilitation? That assumes that you have read the questions in the pre-work, that you understand them, and that you would think about using them. But if you didn't do that, that question is very difficult to answer. So I always have the backup question of, okay, well, you didn't do that, but I don't say it like that. I just know that that's what happens in reality. So I have the other question: what ideas do you have to engage your thinkers in a virtual space, which is more of a general question and helps me understand the thinking of the group and what I focus on. So I've modeled quite a few different types of activities, and I've tried to share insights into how I facilitate virtually and how I try to engage the different thinkers and the different strategies that we can use. In a normal group, where I would be heading now, where's my cursor, is the why again. And sorry, well, not the why so much as I should say the application. So back to the reason we were in the workshop and what we were trying to do. So it might be, you know, what's the lens of the group? Clue spotting, selling a product, problem solving, managing a project, communicating. Today, the lens is simply, in the last 6 minutes, is how we work with digital. So the logistics. So what I'm going to do very quickly is run through the logistics of HBDI Digital and the technologies. So I'm going to be talking at you for the next 5 minutes, and then we will wrap up. So first of all, you need to understand that there are technologies for you, the practitioner, and there are technologies for the thinker. So the first technology for the practitioner is the practitioner portal. Now, what I recommend you do is save that URL. The practitioner portal is your one-stop shop for all your Herrmann practitioner needs. Bookmark that URL and keep it in your favorites, because if you want the slides to this presentation, that's where they're going. If you want the video of this recording of this presentation, that's where it will be. We also have Axon, and Axon is a new, well, it's about 18 months old, and Axon has superseded the old system called HTMS, if that makes sense to you. And Axon is where now the survey is housed. You fill in the survey, the results are kept, and you generate reports. We also have technologies for the thinker. We have the thinker portal. So to access your HBDI Digital, you actually go into something called the Thinker portal. And so the Thinker portal is kind of the gateway, and in the Thinker portal there are a number of things you can do, and that's where you go to access digital. And the last technology is the app, which is a great way in the classroom if you want to use digital. So I've got my phone here, the app's not on, but in a classroom, I don't like people on their computer walking around sharing their computer. It's cumbersome and it's frustrating. So I say, get your phone, bring your phone out, open the app, show this page, share this page. So if I'm in the classroom, I like that as a resource. So a bit more detail. In the practitioner portal, this is what it looks like, and you'll see the number of tiles there. So you should be familiar with this, and if you're not, time to get familiar. You can order HBDIs, you can click on resources, you can view our on-demand PD, and that's a new tile. So there is a lot of on-demand professional development there that you can go and review in your own time. It has links to PD, links to events. So one of the things you can do is you click on resources. When you click on resources, a new page opens up, and if you want resources for digital, you type in the digital and all the resources related to digital will appear. If you want resources around, well, if you want brain resources, type brain and some things will come up, or validity and things will come up, or marketing, whatever it is, and you can search the different resources. So that's the practitioner portal. The resource tab. The other thing you can do is select Axon. And so if you select Axon, this is how you can learn to navigate the system to become a self-processor. You learn how to create invitations, how to manage your thinkers, how to view your thinkers digital before. So let's talk a bit more about Axon. There's the URL for Axon. It's also recommended that you save that URL as a bookmark, because this is the place you go to self-process. So if you want to start processing on your own, rather than us doing all the admin work for you, contact your customer service rep to do that. Your profiles are stored there and you can access the digital profile. So I'm about to debrief Lauren Pettigrew, and I want to make sure that I see her profile before. So what's the process of debriefing Lauren from my point of view? First of all, I search for her in Axon. I select Lauren and I click on her name, and then I click on view results. When I do that, this particular page opens and it is Lauren's summary of her profile, so I can start preparing. And then I click on HBDI Digital and it goes into her digital profile. So I can prepare Lauren's digital debrief using this. Okay, but how do I give access to Lauren? So I use the Thinker portal, which is this page here. So the Thinker portal has your profile available. It has a journey. So you can see here my cursor's moving to show you the journey, and that's where the activities that I talked about are going to be coming in an ongoing way. There's a preference code search, which is where I can, you might remember the red tab of the interpretation booklet where you could read all the different preference codes. You can now search them using this function, and you can see past assessments you've completed, and you can also see e-learning you've completed. So I get Lauren to go to this page and maybe explore it, and I say, okay, Lauren, I'm going to let you unlock your profile. And so I send her an email with an unlock code or a preference code to unlock it. I click there and then she gets into her profile like so. So that's the logistical process of how it works. So I just want to clarify that you still maintain control of when you give access to the digital profile. If you're a premium processor, it happens during the ordering process. When you're asked certain questions, you create an unlock code. So the unlock code could be, I love HBDI. And then when you want the practitioner to unlock their profile, you give them that code and they unlock it. The backup as a code is their preference code. And it's very important to have a backup for groups that come from multiple regions. So I used that with you guys because you come from all over the place. We used our preference code to get in. If you're a self-processor in the invitation setup stage, you create your code as well there, and it's explained in how you do that. So that's a very important step now. It's a new step, so you control when they access their digital. Okay, just to summarize again, we have for you the practitioner portal, for the Thinker portal, and the app. Here's a summary of what each of these things are about. And to recap, and so what I am going to do is, 30 seconds left on the rocket clock today, is wrap up. So we've got thinking about digital, we've got the benefits, the technical considerations, so reduced time, reduced costs for self-processors, less classroom time, less travel, and we have the opportunity to use the online classroom features. In the green quadrant, how and when would you use it? How would you minimize risks? Well, you need to think about when they're accessing their profile. I prefer to give access prior. I give questions prior because I don't like dealing with lots of technical challenges of I can't get the URL, I can't log in, I can't see it. So I get them to do that prior. I also contact participants prior. So think about the structure of your learning. I use learning fundamentals. I run additional buy-in sessions virtually. Who would you use it for? Well, a lot of you talked about that. Your clients are saying we want it. And so, you have to start facilitating virtually, but virtual clients, remote clients, paperless clients, interested clients, cost-saving clients, of course. And the opportunities here are for you to reconceptualize your facilitation, which is the essence of what I wanted to share with you today. See how you can fit more in less time by structuring learning at pre-learning and during and then post-learning, get more effective in your learning design and reach scale or reach more clients. So that's the end of my webinar session. And time is up, so some of you will have to go. I would usually conclude with questions or insights. So if you have a question, please stay on the line and I'll stay on and answer it for you. If you have an insight, please share that in the chat. If you don't have either, you're welcome to say see you later, and I look forward to seeing you in the future at either a live face-to-face session or at an ongoing webinar. Thank you for your time today. As I said, a recording will be available next week, and please feel free to get in touch if you have any further questions. So what I'm doing is typing in my email address for those of you who don't know me so well. You can email me, particularly if you've got questions about virtual facilitation. Happy to share some more of my stories and experiences of what's been working and not working. As I said, felt that I was not very effective, so I went back to uni and did a degree to learn about it. And I look forward to hearing your stories. You will be receiving an email with a summary of today, and also we please ask you to fill in a feedback form on how the learning experience was, so we can continue to improve, or if it was effective for you, run these sessions more in the future. So enjoy the rest of your day. I thank you all for your engagement. And as I said, I will be sitting online for the next 10 minutes if you need any particular specific questions you'd like to ask me. Otherwise, see you later.